In Lagos, in a dimly lit apartment that overlooked the chaos of the city, the professor worked silently. For years, he had studied Nigeria's problems, the corruption that had made the rich richer and the poor forgotten. He wasn't a politician, nor was he interested in speeches or protests. He wanted action, bold, calculated, and unforgettable. The Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN in Abuja, became his target. But not for theft. Stealing money was temporary. Printing it? That was revolutionary. He would expose the greed of the elite and plant the idea that the system could be challenged. The Central Bank of Nigeria was no ordinary target. Located in the heart of Abuja, it stood as a fortress of wealth and power, surrounded by armed guards and the most advanced security systems the government could afford. To the common man, it was untouchable. To the professor, it was the perfect symbol of everything wrong with the system. The professor had studied the CBN for years, collecting every detail about its operations. He knew about the weekly maintenance shutdowns, when the building's systems were temporarily offline. He knew about the underground tunnels built during colonial times that connected the bank to nearby facilities. He even knew how disorganized the security agencies were, often too busy fighting for jurisdiction to work together effectively. "This is where they'll underestimate us," the professor said. "They'll think no one would dare touch the CBN, but they won't see us coming." To execute his plan, he needed a team, not just anyone, but people with the skills and courage to handle an operation of this scale. The professor began his search. Over months, he scouted, observed, and chose 6 individuals from across Nigeria. Each brought something unique to the table. He gave them code names, names of Nigerian cities, to keep their identities secret. The first was Abuja, a sharp negotiator with a way of making people listen. The professor found him mediating a tense land dispute in a small Abuja community. His calm demeanor and persuasive tone won over both sides in minutes. "I don't just talk," Abuja said when approached. "I convince." The professor smiled and handed him the first piece of the puzzle. Next was Port Harcourt, the explosives expert, who was discovered in the volatile Niger Delta. She was dismantling an old oil pipeline rig with precise detonations when the professor approached. "You're either incredibly skilled or incredibly reckless," he said, watching her from a distance. She turned with a sly grin. "Both," she replied, before agreeing to join the team. Kano, the strategist, came next. A retired military officer, he was now living a quiet life, running security drills for local businesses. The professor watched him in action, noticing his natural authority and precision. When Kano was approached, he hesitated. "This could destroy everything I've built," he said. The professor simply replied, "Or it could rebuild everything Nigeria has lost." Calabar, the hacker, was the easiest to find, but the hardest to convince. She ran an underground tech hub where she hacked for fun and profit. "You want me to break into the CBN?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I could do it in my sleep, but why should I care?" The professor handed her a file with evidence of how government corruption had devastated local tech initiatives. She joined without another word. Ibadan, the janitor, was already working at the CBN, feeding the professor insider information for months. He wasn't a professional thief, but his position gave him access to critical intel. "This isn't about stealing," the professor assured him. "It's about justice." Ibadan nodded, his resolve growing stronger. Finally, there was Onitsha, the logistics expert. He operated a network of untraceable transportation routes across state borders. When the professor explained the plan, Onitsha laughed. "You're crazy," he said, "but I've always liked crazy." He signed on immediately. The warehouse in Lagos was silent as the 6 recruits entered, each one unsure of what to expect. They had followed the professor's instructions to the letter, arriving at staggered times to avoid suspicion. Inside, they found a simple setup, a large table, stacks of files, and a wall covered in diagrams, maps, and scribbled notes. The atmosphere was tense. None of them had met each other before, and they didn't know what kind of leader the professor would be. When the professor entered, the room fell silent. He carried a calm authority that demanded attention. Without introducing himself, he stepped to the wall and began speaking. "What you see here," he said, gesturing to the plans, "is our mission. Not just to take money, but to show this country that the system is vulnerable." He turned to face the group. Each of you has been chosen because you're the best at what you do. But this isn't about individual skills, it's about working together. If we succeed, we change everything. If we fail, we disappear. The recruits exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. The professor picked up a file from the table and handed it to Abuja. "This is the first stage," he said. "Study it, question it, prepare to execute it flawlessly." Abuja opened the file and read aloud. "Infiltration during a maintenance shutdown. 3 days to control the CBN. Print billions. Escape undetected." He looked up, skeptical. "And you think this is possible?" The professor smiled faintly. "I don't think, I know." Port Harcourt leaned back in her chair. 3 days inside the CBN? You know what kind of heat that's going to bring. EFCC, police, maybe even the army. "Which is why you're here," the professor replied. "You all bring something unique to this team. Together, we are untouchable." Calabar studied the plans quietly before speaking. "You've accounted for firewalls, backups, and redundancies. But what happens if they cut the power completely?" The professor nodded. "They will. And when they do, you'll make sure we stay in control." The tension in the room began to shift. Doubt gave way to determination as the professor explained the details of the plan. By the end of the meeting, the group was united. They weren't just a team, they were a movement. The first challenge was trust. While the professor had meticulously chosen his team, they were strangers to each other. Abuja, always quick with words, tested Kano's patience with his humor. Port Harcourt's fiery temper clashed with Calabar's quiet demeanor. Onitsha, the logistics man, kept to himself, observing everything. Ibadan, the insider, seemed the least experienced, which drew skepticism from the rest. The professor had anticipated this. "Trust doesn't come from words," he told them during one of their first strategy sessions. "It comes from results. The plan will force you to rely on each other. Doubt isn't an option." The team spent weeks in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of Lagos, turning theory into practice. Kano led drills, simulating everything from police ambushes to emergency evacuations. "Discipline will save us," he reminded the group as they ran through scenarios repeatedly. Calabar set up a mock CBN security system using second-hand equipment. "This is their first layer of defense," she explained, showing the team how to navigate the cameras and alarms. "If we slip here, it's over before we even start." Port Harcourt worked on creating precise charges for the vault doors. "Timing is everything," she explained, setting off a small demonstration blast. 1 second too soon or too late, and we lose the entire mission. Abuja practiced his role as negotiator, rehearsing potential conversations with the authorities. "The key is to control the tempo," he told them. "Make them dance to our rhythm, not the other way around." Meanwhile, Onitsha developed escape routes and contingency plans. "If we're boxed in," he said, "we need to be ghosts. No trace, no trail." The professor watched silently, offering guidance when needed, but letting the group find their rhythm. He knew that for the plan to work, they had to operate as a single unit. Mistakes made now could be corrected. Mistakes during the heist would be fatal. As the weeks turned into months, the team began to gel. Tensions faded, replaced by respect and a shared sense of purpose. By the end of the preparation phase, they were no longer 6 individuals, they were one. With the team now functioning as a unit, the professor unveiled the full scope of his plan. Gathered around a large table in the dimly lit factory, the group listened intently as he walked them through every detail. "Our target is the Central Bank of Nigeria," he began. "It's not just heavily guarded, it's a fortress. But every fortress has weaknesses, and we've spent years finding them." He pulled out a detailed map of the bank's interior. "We'll enter during the weekly maintenance shutdown. For 3 days, the vault's systems are offline for servicing. That's our window." Calabar interrupted. "What about backup systems? The alarms don't completely shut down, right?" "You're correct," the professor replied. "But they rely on 2 main power sources. You'll cut the first remotely. When the second kicks in, Port Harcourt's team will take it out manually." He pointed to a specific area of the map. "Here's the maintenance shaft. It's rarely checked, but it leads directly into the sublevel of the vault. Ibran, this is where your access codes will come in." Port Harcourt leaned forward. "What about the guards? You can't tell me they'll just sit back while we stroll in." Kano answered before the professor could. "They won't. That's where Abuja comes in. He'll keep the authorities talking, create enough distractions to buy us time. Abuja smirked. I'll have them so tangled in bureaucracy, they won't know who's in charge. The professor continued. Once inside, we'll divide into teams. Calabar and Ibadan will handle the security systems. Port Harcourt and Kano will oversee the vault. Onitsha will manage logistics and ensure the printed money is transported safely. I'll coordinate everything from the outside. What happens if things go sideways? Onitsha asked, always practical. The professor pulled out another diagram, showing a series of underground tunnels. This is our escape route. Built during the colonial era, they connect the bank to an old train depot. If necessary, we use them to disappear. The room was silent as the team absorbed the complexity of the plan. It wasn't just daring, it was audacious. Yet, as the professor explained each step, the impossibility of it seemed to fade. He had thought of everything, or so it seemed. You'll each have a role, he concluded. But remember, the success of this operation depends on one thing: precision. Every second counts. If we're too slow, we're caught. If we're too fast, we risk mistakes. Trust the plan, trust each other, and we'll make history. Before attempting the real heist, the professor insisted on a full-scale rehearsal. Practice eliminates surprises, he told the team. We can't afford to improvise when the stakes are this high. The abandoned factory was transformed into a replica of the CBN's interior. Using Ibadan's insider knowledge and Calabar's digital schematics, the professor recreated key areas: the vault, the control room, and the maintenance shaft. Every detail, from guard rotations to the layout of the corridors, was accounted for. Treat this like it's the real thing, Kano instructed the team. No shortcuts, no excuses. The rehearsal began with a simulated entry through the maintenance shaft. Port Harcourt rigged a small explosive to breach the access point, while Ibadan provided the codes to disable the first set of alarms. Calabar monitored their progress remotely, testing her ability to override the system in real time. Once inside, the team split into their designated roles. Port Harcourt and Kano worked on opening the vault, using a combination of explosives and brute force. Calabar simulated power cuts, forcing the team to adapt to blackout conditions. Onitsha coordinated the transport of fake cash, testing the speed and efficiency of the operation. Meanwhile, Abuja practiced his negotiation tactics. The professor played the role of a stubborn police chief, throwing every curveball he could think of. You've got 5 minutes to release a hostage, the professor barked during one scenario. Abuja, calm and composed, responded, 5 minutes? Then you'll need 10 more to explain to your superiors why you botched this operation. Mistakes were made during the test run. The team struggled with timing, miscommunications caused delays, and one of the simulated alarms was triggered. Kano called for a halt. We can't move forward like this, he said bluntly. If this had been real, we'd all be in custody by now. The professor didn't seem disappointed. That's why we practice, he said. We learn now so we don't fail later. For the next week, they repeated the test run over and over, refining their methods until every step was flawless. By the end, the team could execute the entire operation with their eyes closed. They knew each other's roles so well that words became unnecessary. As they completed the final rehearsal, the professor addressed the team. This isn't just about getting it right, he said. It's about becoming the kind of people who can pull this off. And now, you are. The date was set. 6 months of preparation boiled down to a single weekend. The professor called for one last briefing, bringing the team together in the warehouse for a final review of the plan. The air was thick with anticipation, every member of the team aware that their lives would never be the same after this. This is it, the professor began, standing at the head of the table. In 48 hours, we make history. Everything we've planned, every risk we've accounted for, comes into play. He gestured to the map of the central bank pinned to the wall. The maintenance shutdown begins at midnight. We'll have a window of exactly 72 hours before the system comes back online. Remember, every second counts. Kano stepped forward, his tone serious. Stick to your roles. There's no room for improvisation. If anyone falls behind, it jeopardizes the entire mission. Port Harcourt smirked. We get it, soldier boy. Follow orders, no heroics. Exactly, Kano replied, ignoring the jab. This isn't about glory, it's about precision. The professor addressed each member individually, reminding them of their responsibilities. Abuja, you're the face of this operation. Keep the authorities distracted and buy us time. Abuja nodded confidently. I've got this. They'll be chasing their tails while we finish the job. Port Harcourt, the professor continued. Your explosives need to be exact. No room for error. She grinned. Precision is my middle name. Calabar, keep the system under our control. If the alarms go off, it's game over. She adjusted her glasses and replied simply, they won't. Ibadan, your access codes are our first line of entry. You're the key to getting us inside. Ibadan, quieter than the rest, nodded solemnly. I'll be ready. And Onitsha, the professor finished, you ensure the money moves out safely and unseen. You're our escape. Onitsha gave a slight smile. Trust me, I've done this before, just not with billions. The professor paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. We're not just robbing a bank, he reminded them. We're sending a message to the people, to the system, to everyone who thinks power is untouchable. He raised a glass of water, and the team followed suit. To success, he said simply. The others echoed him. To success. As they left the warehouse that night, the team felt the gravity of what lay ahead. This was no longer just a plan. It was their reality, and there was no turning back. Midnight struck, and the maintenance shutdown at the Central Bank of Nigeria began. The streets of Abuja were quieter than usual, the city resting under a cloak of darkness. The professor and his team were already in position, moving with precision as the countdown started. Ibadan led the way, entering the building through a service entrance he had used for years as a janitor. He swiped his access card, and the team followed silently, dressed in maintenance uniforms and carrying their equipment in unmarked bags. So far, so good, he whispered through the comms. The professor's voice came in calm and steady from his remote location. Keep moving, you're on schedule. Port Harcourt quickly set the charges on the maintenance shaft leading to the vault sublevel. Ready in 3, 2, 1. A muffled explosion echoed, clearing the way. Kano and Calabar secured the perimeter, ensuring no alarms were triggered. We're clear, Kano confirmed. As they descended into the vault's lower levels, Calabar hacked into the security system. Disabling cameras, rerouting backup feeds, done, she reported. On the monitors, everything appeared normal to the outside world. Abuja stationed himself near the main entrance, ready to intercept any unexpected visitors. The floor is quiet, he said, scanning the area. But don't get comfortable. Once inside the sublevel, the team reached the massive steel doors of the vault. This was Port Harcourt's moment. She inspected the door carefully, placing small precision charges at specific points. This is art, she said with a grin, stepping back to detonate. A sharp, controlled blast followed, and the heavy doors creaked open. Inside was the prize, the printing machines, ready to churn out billions. Onitsha and Ibadan quickly unloaded their equipment, setting up the paper and plates needed for the operation. We're in business, Onitsha said, adjusting the machines. Meanwhile, the professor monitored every move from his hideout in Aja, Lagos. Multiple screens displayed security feeds, police radio channels, and the team's live audio. You've got 68 hours left, he reminded them. Stick to the timeline. Everything was going smoothly until a minor glitch in the backup system caused a flicker on one of the cameras. Calabar caught it immediately. We've got a hiccup, she said, frantically typing on her laptop. Give me a minute. Kano glanced at her. We don't have a minute. Trust me, she replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. After a tense few seconds, the camera stabilized. Fixed. Let's keep moving. As the first batch of freshly printed money rolled off the machines, the team felt a rush of adrenaline. But there was no time to celebrate. The real challenge was yet to come. As the team worked efficiently in the lower levels of the central bank, an unforeseen complication arose. A cleaning crew, scheduled to arrive during the shutdown, entered the main floor earlier than expected. Abuja, stationed at the entrance, caught sight of them just as they unlocked the door. They're not supposed to be here, Abuja said through the comms, his voice low but firm. The professor's calm response came immediately. Delay them. Don't escalate. Abuja stepped forward, smiling confidently. Good evening, he said, holding up a forged ID badge. We're with the maintenance team. The building's under full lockdown. You'll have to reschedule. The crew leader hesitated, glancing at the unfamiliar face. We weren't told about this. It was a last-minute decision, Abuja replied smoothly. Official orders from management. You can confirm, but it'll waste your time. Your shift's already over. Before the leader could respond, Kano's voice cut through the comms. We've got movement on the west wing. Security guard doing a sweep. Abuja's heart raced, but he maintained his composure. Let me escort you out, he said to the cleaning crew, guiding them toward the exit. It's for your own safety. Meanwhile, Kano intercepted the patrolling guard before he could get close to the vault. Disguised as a contractor, Kano pretended to inspect a ventilation duct. Evening, he said casually, nodding at the guard. Routine check, nothing out of the ordinary. The guard stopped, suspicious. This area is not part of the maintenance plan. It is now, Kano replied. Management wanted a thorough sweep. You can report it, but I'd suggest finishing your round. These ducts are filthy. The guard hesitated, but eventually walked away, radioing his supervisor as he moved. He's calling it in, Kano said quietly through the comms. We're losing time. Back in the sublevel, tension rose as the team continued printing the money. Calabar was monitoring the situation, her fingers hovering over her laptop. We need a diversion, she suggested. Something to keep them distracted while we finish this batch. The professor's voice broke through. Abuja, can you buy us more time? I'll try, Abuja replied, stepping outside to intercept the incoming report from the guard. He knew this wasn't just about smooth talking anymore. One mistake could compromise the entire operation. The professor's calm, steady tone reassured the team. This is the pressure we trained for. Stay focused. No panic. As Abuja worked to defuse the situation above, the rest of the team below pushed forward. They had no choice. Failure wasn't an option. The operation had been running like clockwork, but Abuja's charm could only delay the inevitable for so long. The cleaning crew had left, but the suspicious guard's report reached his supervisor, and soon a response team was dispatched to the bank. They're sending additional personnel to check the perimeter, Kano reported over the comms. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they figure out something's off. 20 minutes is enough, the professor responded calmly from his hideout. Calabar, what's the status of the security feeds? I've looped all exterior cameras, she replied. But if they physically check the entrances, there's nothing I can do from here. The professor considered the options. Abuja, you need to stall them. Keep them outside the building at all costs. Abuja sighed, tightening his tie as he prepared to intercept the response team. Leave it to me. Just make sure the rest of the team is ready if this goes south. Down in the sublevel, Port Harcourt was growing impatient. We're burning daylight, she snapped, carefully placing another charge to open the secondary vault door. If we spend all our time babysitting the guards, we'll never finish. Kano, always the voice of reason, replied, Patience. We're not just breaking into a vault, we're executing a revolution. Rushing gets us killed. Port Harcourt rolled her eyes but stayed focused on the task at hand. The door gave way with a controlled blast, revealing the secondary printing equipment. Onicha moved quickly to set up the next stage of the operation. We're ready to print the larger denominations, he reported, but we'll need more time for the bigger batches. Then work faster, Kano ordered. We've got guards closing in. Meanwhile, Abuja stood at the main entrance, face to face with the newly arrived response team. Good evening, officers, he greeted with a confident smile. What seems to be the problem? We received a report of suspicious activity, the leader of the team said, scanning the building. We're here to investigate. Abuja nodded, his tone steady. I understand your concern, but we're in the middle of a scheduled maintenance shutdown. It's standard protocol. No one enters or exits until it's complete. The officer frowned. We weren't informed of this. Abuja pulled out a forged maintenance schedule, handing it over. I'm sure it's just a communication error. Feel free to confirm with your superiors, but I can assure you, everything is under control. As the officers debated, Abuja subtly tapped his comms. Professor, they're not buying it. We need a backup plan. The professor's voice came through immediately. Stay calm. If they escalate, we'll handle it. But for now, keep them outside. Below, the tension was rising. Onicha worked as quickly as he could to load the freshly printed bundles into secure containers, while Calabar monitored the systems for any signs of detection. We've got maybe 15 minutes before this gets messy, she warned. We'll finish, Kano said firmly. We have to. But as the team pushed forward, the cracks in their operation were beginning to show. They were running out of time, and outside, Abuja was running out of excuses. The situation outside was spiraling. Abuja's smooth words kept the response team at bay, but the officers were growing restless. One of them, a seasoned veteran, wasn't convinced. He kept glancing at the building, his instincts telling him something wasn't right. Enough talk, the officer finally said, waving to his men. We're going inside. Abuja held up his hands in mock surrender, trying to stall them. Gentlemen, I assure you. Before he could finish, the officer brushed past him, radioing for backup. Get 2 more units here. I want this place combed. Inside, Calabar's screen lit up with a warning. We've got company, she said urgently. They're entering the building. The professor's voice came through the comms, calm but firm. Calabar, seal the sublevel. Keep them from reaching you. Kano, prepare for confrontation, but avoid escalation. Kano nodded, his military training kicking in. Port Harcourt, secure the vault doors. Onitsha, finish the loading. No one stops until I give the word. The team moved quickly, locking down the sublevel as the first officers stepped inside the bank. Port Harcourt placed additional charges at the main vault entrance, creating a barrier in case they were discovered. If they come down here, we'll make it very uncomfortable, she muttered. Calabar redirected power to certain systems, creating small disturbances to mislead the officers. Lights flickered on one side of the building while doors jammed on another. That should keep them busy, she said, but it won't hold for long. Abuja's voice came through, tense. I've got 2 more units arriving. They're checking every entrance. I don't think I can hold them off much longer. The professor made a quick decision. Abuja, step back. Let them search the upper floors, but keep them focused away from the sublevel. Calabar, prepare a shutdown if they get too close. As the officers moved through the building, one of them noticed something odd near the maintenance shaft. A faint residue from Port Harcourt's charges. This isn't part of the routine maintenance, the officer said, kneeling to inspect the area. The professor, watching through Calabar's hacked security feeds, spoke quickly. Kano, we've got a problem. They're near the shaft. I'm on it, Kano replied, moving toward the sublevel entrance. He locked the door from the inside and placed himself nearby, ready to act if the officers tried to breach it. But then the unthinkable happened. One of the officers radioed back to their command post. We've found something, possible unauthorized entry, requesting immediate backup. Calabar's system lit up like a Christmas tree. They've triggered a secondary alarm, she said. We're flagged. The professor's calm facade cracked for the first time. All right, everyone, listen carefully. We're shifting to phase 2. Accelerate the printing. Prepare the tunnels. Kano's voice was steady despite the chaos. We've trained for this. Stay sharp. The sublevel was now a hive of activity as the team worked faster than ever. Onitsha secured the money containers, Port Harcourt set contingency charges, and Calabar scrambled to keep the systems under their control. Every second felt like an eternity. Above, the officers regrouped, unaware of what lay below. But the clock was ticking, and the team knew it was only a matter of time before the entire building was surrounded.